Hi everyone, my name is Tori Burdick. First of all, I wanted to thank you for showing up to my artist talk. First time doing anything like this, so I appreciate seeing all of these faces kind of piling in now. And to anyone who is watching it on the live stream, thank you for watching via the live stream. So I aptly decided to title this presentation, Paint What You Want, and maybe someday somebody might think about buying it. Because that pretty much encompasses my artistic journey so far, is just trying to stay true to what I've wanted to do as an artist and slowly finding success via that. So wanted to start with a bit of a quote, and by a bit of a quote, I mean just a little bit of one. Fake it till you make it. My motto for success thus far. As an artist, and an artist who really has only started trying to work professionally, and I'm using the bunny ears yet again, this has been something I've had to stay true to. I might not really know what I'm doing, but also I'm the only one who can do what I'm doing, so words to live by, and also I think that applies to most of us in our lives. We're the only ones who can really, do what we do, and sometimes you need a bit of pretending in order to convince others that you are capable, and I think you're going to see where that comes into play throughout the rest of my artist talk. So a little bit about me. I was born in North Carolina, but I was raised in Corning pretty much my entire life, so I do consider myself very much a local. My family is from here. I was a DC Comics nerd as a kid. Absolutely fell in love, especially with, the girl power sort of superheroes at a young age. I loved the approach to artwork, and it was really for a while the direction I wanted to take my life. I was convinced as a little kid that I was going to become a DC Comics illustrator. My mom even had a wood panel printed with that on it that I had hanging in my bedroom for a period of time before I decided it was embarrassing and hid it away or threw it out, or I really don't know what happened to that poor thing. But it was around middle school that my perspective on this sort of started to shift. As a lot of artists might have experienced going to art class, it almost felt to a certain degree stifling. I hated being told what to draw and what to paint. I hated sitting down and doing still lifes. I hated being told, what direction my life was going to go, because I did show talent at a young age, admittedly. And it made me start to resent art to a certain degree. And I think sort of the nail in the coffin came for me in high school when I started to have other interests, and I was, absolutely fully resenting going to art class and being sat down and told what to paint for 40 minutes every day on my schedule. And I remember being given an assignment. It was a paper mache assignment, and I am primarily a colored pencil, I work with paint, work with colored pencil. I'm a 2D artist, so this was out of my element, but I decided to embrace it and create something that I didn't think the art teacher would be super keen on, and she ended up actually really liking it. And I wanted to take it home, give it to my little sister as a gift, and I remember the art teacher becoming absolutely irate with me about this. She wanted to put it on display in the school. I told her no, and she took the project and she slammed it on the table, and she even cussed at me about it, which I had not expected at that age. And the next year, I was told that I had to take art class again, and I had a fight, borderline, with my guidance counselor, and I told her I'd filled out the prerequisites, and I straight up refused to go to art class. I filled up every period of my day. There were 9 of them, including my lunch period, with classes. Some of them were absolute nonsense that I had absolutely no interest in, but I did this to keep out of art class. You can tell how well that worked out for me in the long run. So I graduated from the first combined high school class in Corning in 2015. And from there, I ended up moving to Germany. I was a Rotary Youth Exchange Ambassador, which is just a fancy way they tell you to say exchange student. I went to high school over there. I began learning German. I absolutely fell in love with it. You know, every country is different. Every country has its problems, but sometimes you find a place and you find your niche and you really feel at home, and that's how I felt there. So I ended up returning there to study international relations, and this was really my first lesson in how sometimes you can do everything right. You can commit yourself to learning a language, to learning a culture. You can get the best grades, and you can be on top, and sometimes shit happens that you absolutely cannot control, and the rug is pulled out from under you, and everything comes crashing to the ground. And that's what happened to me. So at the end of my first semester at university, I was forced to drop out. At the time, I was on a student residence permit, Aufenthaltserlaubnis. So I ended up trying to stick it out. I went on to work at 2 different tattoo parlors. Anyone who's trying to get into the tattooing scene knows that this is not easy, and especially when you're still trying to learn the language, you're still getting to know a city, when you have, you know, I had friends there, but only a handful who were willing to get tattoos from me, and certainly no family to con into that. And I was also on a residence permit as a student that had expired because I was no longer a student. So I was ultimately forced to make the decision to return home. I don't know if anyone has put together these pieces, but that did make me, for an extended period of time, an illegal immigrant there. So while I was begrudgingly returning to the States, I had friends who had resided in the States since they were children, who, due to political circumstances here, were stranded in a country and not able to return home. So transitioning, I knew that if I ever wanted to get back, which was at the time my goal, I'd hoped 7 months, because that was when basically there was a bit of a time clock, and 7 months would be the reset. I could go back to Germany, get a new residency, and stay there basically without any paperwork for 3 months. So I'd hoped within 7 months to a year, a very brief period of time, that I could return home. And home to me at the time was Germany. But I knew I had to find success as an artist first. And I had to figure out a plan. I had to save up some money. And, well, it's been 4 years now, so you can see how that plan went as well. My plan of not becoming an artist, and then my plan of returning. My plans are consistently changing. So the reason I'm showing you this art right here is these are 3 local artists whose work I, for one, think is absolutely fantastic. David Higgins, he is a professor at CCC, which is partially how I got to know him. He paints these incredible landscapes, and he paints houses. I was having a conversation once with another professor who works with him, and he just exclaimed to me, he was like, how does he paint houses with such personality? They have such character. I said, I have no idea, because I can't do that. I don't see that in these things. Christina M. Johnson is another one. She paints gorgeous flowers, and she did a series of cupcakes where the frosting on them is so crisp yet soft at the same time. It's angular, but it's buttery. I just absolutely love the color combination that she has in this piece here. And another artist whose work has really struck me lately, though I have never met her personally, is Trish Coonrod. I regularly walk past the West End Gallery, and I'm always in awe at her still lifes. It's hard to see through this picture, but the precision and the accuracy and the realism just blows my mind. She has a piece with tomatoes on the vine, and they are so plump and juicy, I just want to punch my fist through the glass and eat them. But another reason I bring up their art isn't just because I'm quite a fan of all of them, but it's because these were all directions in which I was encouraged to pursue my art when I first moved back. Anyone who is in the area knows that still lifes, know that landscape, those are what people believe really sell. You know, it's what tourists are frequently drawn to, it's what's pushed in galleries, particularly in Corning. And when you're starting out, you know, you're always going to be encouraged to do what's going to make you money right off the bat. But personally, I could never do any of these things. Sitting down and doing a still life, the thought of it brought me back to art class, and why I started to hate art to begin with. What turned me away from it was I had the same feeling when somebody told me to paint a landscape that I had when my grandpa would encourage me to just go start selling insurance. It was not for me, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. So something that I really started to do was look into some artists whose work really spoke to me. And these were just a few of many, but one of my all-time favorite artists whose work I discovered shortly after returning to the States was Tori. She's based out of New Mexico, I believe, but she's a feminist artist who creates just these insane surrealistic portraits. Her work has a really realistic quality to it. She uses oil paints to render her figures, but then she adds these abstract elements. She's not afraid to use glitter and neon colors and pop culture references, and this is one of my favorite pieces by her, and you can tell she uses pretty much everything I've mentioned. It is absolutely wild. It is absolutely something that I would have been convinced in my mind couldn't sell around here, but she's wildly famous, and well, I don't know if wildly famous, but relative to anything I've hoped to achieve. Another artist whose work I came to really adore was, she just goes by Tanya on Instagram. I only recently learned her last name, Gomolskaya. I'm hoping I'm saying it correctly. And if you look up close, I don't know if anyone on the live stream can see or if anyone here can see, but she has used broken down Barbie doll parts to create her frame. So there's actually hair sticking out of that piece, there's weird creepy faces and legs, and I absolutely loved the textural element. I loved how she wasn't afraid to do something weird, and how she took something that was traditionally feminine and childlike and just made it dark and eerie. One of the first muralists whose work I discovered, she goes by the tag, or they rather go by the tag Squidlicker. They have painted murals throughout the United States. A lot of them are in Hawaii as well. And they frequently repeat these patterns of aliens and just extraterrestrial life, skulls. It's very, it celebrates queer life, and it's just beautiful and colorful, and things that I also wouldn't have thought anyone would want to put on their wall, but I'm glad someone has agreed to have painted on their wall, because their work just really, I find captivating. I love the use of color, and I guess what I'm really getting at that spoke to me about all of these artists was just how unafraid they all are, and how much their work really speaks to the not giving a damn mentality. So I was really trying to sort of take inspiration from that and keep in my mind that, part of being an artist and part of, what made me want to go back to it was doing something that made me feel joy, that spoke to me on a deeper level. So these are some of my earlier works, And when I started off, I was working on paper, and these were the reason I show these works is because they were some of the first where I really felt I was sort of embracing the style that I have today, pairing different sort of weird elements with a realistic portrait. Another reason why I'm showing you these is because they were on paper, which is something that I learned through trial and error was not something I could work on. I am a very, very messy artist. I make mistakes. I work with colored pencil, which frequently has these little crumbs that come off of it, and if they stick to your arm, you smear them across the white of the paper, and then that perfect white is no longer a perfect white, and you can try to erase them, but it just makes it worse. So I looked into it more and more, and I thought, how do you keep the white of the paper white? And you just have to be pristine. You have to lay down tape, or you have to, if you're a watercolor artist, you don't touch it. And if you do, it's done. It's been touched. It is no longer white. It is no longer that sort of pristine plain color that you were hoping to achieve. And another reason why I realized paper was definitely not for me, and this commission, I think, really embodies that, is if you make a mistake, there's only so much you can do to fix it, like I said, and in this case, I had put several hours into a piece and realized that apparently I was a little bit too confident in my memories of my science education and had considerably mixed up the size of some planets, namely Mercury and Mars. And being a perfectionist, I absolutely could not let that stand. I could not let that go to a client. So I had a bit of a meltdown. I ripped the piece in half, and I did it all over again. And this piece right here, Mutiny, was probably my last major piece that I did on paper. And although I'm happy with how she turned out, there are certainly things that I wish I could change. And had I completed her on wood the way that I do my works today, I would be able to change them. But I will not point, well, I'll point them out. I'm not particularly keen on the scales around her backside. They just don't curve the way that they should. And that is something that bothers me to this day. It hangs up in my living room. I look at that and I say, I wish I'd done that on wood. I wish I'd done that on wood. So another thing that I experimented with at around the same time that I did those works was something called pour paintings. They really became popular around this time on social media. People were constantly posting them, posting videos. I found them cool. I thought they were sort of easy and fun to make, and this is where I stumbled and fell into the trap that I'd been so keen on avoiding. Was I thought that they would sell. I thought that they would be something quick and easy to sell, and they weren't. For one, they were a money pit. You waste a lot of paint, which if you're experimenting and you're having fun and that's what speaks to you, then great. Then do that, and there are some people who create beautiful, abstract, fluid artworks. But that's just not how my mind works. I like to have a plan, and I like to execute it exactly how my brain shows me that. And this is one of those things where you really, really, really can't control the results. You can sort of guide the results, you can have a plan in mind, but rarely can you execute it accordingly. But it did lay the groundwork for me to add more abstract elements to my later pieces, and it also got me comfortable using paint, which was something I hadn't really used much before. I was using primarily colored pencil and occasionally pen and ink. So as I mentioned, I now use wood. I use it because it's quite durable and it's versatile. And my favorite wood to use actually is just from the hardware store. I've worked on different canvases, wood, because you can purchase wood canvases, but frequently the price of one wood canvas is the same as the price of a massive sheet of wood from Lowe's that you could have cut into multiple canvases. So this piece that you see in the far left top corner, that was the first piece that I started on wood. It's still not completed, still sitting in my parents' basement, but I digress. But the reason I'm showing you all of these really, really sort of messed up and weird pictures of artwork in progress is to just show you really how messy and experimental the process is, and sort of highlight the need to be working on a very durable canvas. First of all, it allows you to use a variety of different mediums. So I could use colored pencil because it held the colored pencil beautifully, and it also created a really nice base tone for portraits. But also I could use paint on the same surface, and it wouldn't cause the paper to warp because it wasn't paper. I could collage, and if I messed up, I could peel it off without ripping anything. If I made a mistake, I could sand it, which is a blessing because I sand things a lot now. And it also allowed me, again, to sort of do some more experimentation with, you can see with this piece, I ended up incorporating elements of fluid art. I used spray paint and cutouts on this one, and again, I used paint and I had to tape and use several layers for this piece here. Next slide, please. So these are some of these pieces now that they're completed. And you can see one of the benefits is I was able to use paint to really create a lot of solid tones. And also there was quite a bit of a transformation from the last slide. These were works that I completed between 2019 and early 2021. Some of them took a couple years to finish in their entirety because I kept returning to them and fixing different elements. There were other works that I started and haven't finished during that time. There are other works that I haven't included, but I think these were some of the more major ones that really showcase the versatility of what I was able to do when I switched to a different canvas. And also, they are all, for the most part, quite autobiographical, with the exception of this commission that I did on the far left, which, again, another example of how sticking to your style allows you to actually do the work that you want to do. I would have never, ever been contacted by that client if I had decided to do landscapes that I thought would sell, or just do portraits of someone's grandma because I knew it was easy and quick. I committed to doing these really large pieces that took so long, and many of them haven't sold yet. But I can feel a sense of accomplishment when I look at them because I know it was what I wanted to make. And even though throughout the entire process I was being told, hey, when are you gonna sell this? You know, you're not making any money. You've been working on this for months and you haven't seen a penny, and you've invested hundreds in supplies and so many hours. What are you doing? This is what I was doing. And another reason I wanted to emphasize these pieces is because they're all quite large. The top two pieces were a little bit smaller. They were 2 by 2, but the majority of them were about my height. So I was rendering figures that were really quite close to real life. And that was something that eventually made me feel a little bit more prepped for murals. This was, first of all, this does sort of show why artists need good cameras and how lighting can really affect your art, because the portrait of this piece did not change from one picture to the next, but you can see that the pipe dragon, or the pipe monster, whatever we want to call this, I named the piece Pipe Dream, has gone through quite a bit of a transformation. I sanded its face off at various points. I changed the color gradient. There's a crack with gold sticking out of it, gold leafing, that I used by building up layers and layers and layers of paint. And that is certainly not something that I could have done had I stuck to paper like I did with the original sketch. But getting back to working big. So prior to this point, I really hadn't done much in the community. I had just been, working on these big pieces tucked away in, at the time, my home studio was a dark corner in an apartment, legitimately just a corner. And then the occasional trip to the basement to spill some paint. So this was my first experience actually getting out in the community was the 2019 Elmira Street Painting Festival. I have very few memories of this event. I was definitely suffering from heat stroke. I met Lynn Rasinko for the first time, and I thought I'd hallucinated her. I didn't remember her name. I just remembered a very flowy figure approached me and asked me if I'd ever thought about painting a mural. And I said no, and then I proceeded to apparently finish that thing and collapse in a sweaty pile in the bushes. Somehow I won second place, despite not knowing what I was doing. It was a very, very difficult surface to work on. I'd never used chalk before to create a piece, and because I was new to the Street Painting Festival and no one knew anything about me, I was not given what one might consider a prime spot. I was given a very, you can see the cracks going through the piece. I did not have a smooth surface to work on. So it was a challenge to say the least. It certainly, I think, contributed to a cool effect, but it was a struggle. But it also really forced me for the first time to sit down, stand up, sweat, and just pound out a piece in a very short amount of time, which is what one has to do with murals. So after completing the Elmira Street Painting Festival, I ended up going on to be a part of my first show. It was a group show hosted by CAE called The Hidden, which allowed me to reconnect with Lynn. It was my first time showing art besides the Street Painting Festival in public. Didn't sell anything at this one, but I ended up the next year making my first gallery sale, which, again, thank you to CAE for that, at the Empower 2020 show, which, thank you to COVID, was cut short. But these were really my first steps, getting out there. And that allowed me to transition the next year to painting murals. So my first mural I completed here in Elmira was Joyrider. I had gone to a public art meeting, or it was a mural workshop of sorts, but it was basically a meeting between the public and artists, discussing what they wanted to see in Elmira and where they wanted the future of art to go. And one of the things that got brought up was that we needed something bright and colorful. So I said, okay, I'm gonna give you bright and colorful. And that was the first mural that we found a spot for. The underpass was a bit of a challenge to work on, but I could not be happier with the location. She really looks like she's gliding into quite a dark tunnel. And the second mural I ended up going on to complete was Against the Current, which you can see kind of, I'm not as familiar with Elmira as I should be, but not too far from here. You can take a little peek at her. She's on the back of a Save-A-Lot building. But this was another one where I just had this sort of crazy idea. I'd had a few too many, and I was standing in my kitchen, and I was just like, I want to paint a girl on a sea turtle, a flying sea turtle. And I didn't think it was going to happen, but I submitted the design, and that is, I was about to say it's my biggest mural yet. It is, I've only painted 2 by myself, but they gave me a massive wall and let me paint this thing, and if I had not just been confident in my crazy nonsense ideas, this never would have come to fruition. Now, I want to go back a little bit. And mind you, those murals were completed in the summer of 2020. Now, back in December of 2019, and even prior to this, I had communicated an interest with some folks who were involved in the High School Learning Center and the Alley Arts program in Corning about painting a collaborative mural. And what the Alley Arts program does is it works with High School Learning Center students, and it pairs them up with the Rockwell Museum, and the Rockwell Museum assists them in designing and creating a mural. So students will take inspiration from an exhibit that's in the Rockwell, and the mural will go, or the video will go on to discuss this more. They'll take a class, and in this class, they'll sit down, they'll create their own art pieces, and then elements from these art pieces will in turn be incorporated into a collaborative group mural. So, December of 2019, I had not painted a single mural yet. And I get a call from Amy Ruza, and basically they have availability. They're looking for an artist to help assist them with the 2020 mural. They'd had somebody lined up who was an actual professional, and last minute that person had to leave the area, and they were left with a vacancy. And somehow I lucked my way into that. So I sat down in an interview with Amy, and she asked me what my experience was. And I said, none yet, but I'll have some. I'm going to paint murals. I had not submitted any designs to CAE yet for my murals that summer. It'd been discussed with Lynn, but there was no guarantee. There were no designs, and there was no real experience. But I said, I'll have the experience, and I'm really good at faking it. The students will not know that I do not have experience. If I have confidence, and I know how to work on a big scale, which I did for my other pieces, I think I can pull this off. And they took me on, albeit tentatively at the time, to partake in the student workshop in which they were designing their pieces. I designed a piece as well. And that ultimately led to this. And this will a little bit more eloquently surmise the mural painting experience. You'll get to hear me sort of ramble at a couple different points with a mask on while I'm hyperventilating in the heat. But this is, a really sort of beautiful student tribute that was also created by another High School Learning Center student at the time. So yeah, I'm gonna.
My name's Amy Ruza. I'm the Youth and Family Programs Educator at the Rockwell, and we are thrilled to paint the 12th mural for the Alley Art Project. The design was inspired by an exhibition on view at the Rockwell, 3 Generations, featuring 3 women artists from the Santa Clara Pueblo.
I think this inspires the community because it's showing that art isn't just in museums, it's also out in the community, out in the world.
Hi, my name's Tori, Burdick, and I'm this year's guest artist working to collaborate with the Alley Arts program to create this year's mural, Earth Mother. It's just been a really awesome experience, working with all these kids. It's just been a great way to really connect with kids, connect with the community, and put some fun art in town.
Everyone sort of portrays a different personality than what they really feel inside, and I sort of want to not have that exist anymore. I think we should always portray who we are.
Hi, I'm Alexis Cook. I was part of the design team for the mural. For me, I did the key portion, and for me, that was the key of life. I think that's a really important motto to hold on to.
My name is Lorelai. I go to the High School Learning Center, and I designed the sunflower. And it symbolizes growth and opening up to new opportunities.
This year's mural, Earth Mother, is inspired by the artwork on view in this exhibition. As seen right behind me, this is the work of artist Helen Harnett. And I want to emphasize that the artwork is by this lineage of women artists, and that connects to our theme this year at the Rockwell, Advancing Women.
Hi, my name's Nick. I'm a high school learning center student, and I like being out in the community and painting and chilling with friends.
The High School Learning Center is so fortunate that we have this collaboration with the Rockwell Museum. This process connects our students to the community. Often when students come to the High School Learning Center, they are feeling disconnected from their education, from their community at large. This provides an incredibly rich opportunity for them to work with artists, to discover their own talents and abilities, to be able to express themselves, and then have it on the walls of our community.
A lot of students were drawn to this triptych here, triptych meaning 3 panels. And what I want to point out is this Avani, this horned water serpent shape figure that goes across the scene of the 3 panels. And this is symbolic of water, essential for life. And we took the image of this sort of river shape, and that was incorporated into our mural design, a river that wraps around the building. We are so thrilled that this year's mural actually turns the corner of a building. It's new for us and it's exciting.
But this gave us an opportunity to feel like we were doing something that was important to us that we do every year, and there we were out there painting, and it brightened the lives of the students, I know for sure. You can't help but see it when you drive through town and you go by our murals. It makes our city a better place. It makes us all a little happier, and we're so grateful that we have this opportunity.
Now, I know I discussed before how all of my previous art pieces and murals, they were very much ideas of my own brain, flash ideas that I had, and then I committed to paper and wood and brick and peeling rotting walls. But this, despite not being that, was by far my favorite project to work on. The process was just something that I found absolutely beautiful. Working with students and showing them that even if they're not confident in their own ability, if they're not confident in their own voice, if they're not confident in their own ideas, that they can create something really beautiful that they can be proud of. And I feel as if most of them really, really were. That's not to say that this was not an incredibly challenging process. I was combining ideas from multiple minds and trying to create a cohesive image out of them. I was the primary artist designing this, but I was working with former director of the Rockwell Museum, Gigi Alvarez, as well as Amy Ruza, to create this. So there's 3 main minds behind the sketch, and then all of the students' work. That combined with the fact that the Gaffer District, bless you Gaffer District, loves to have a considerable hand in things. The design went through several different stages before we even had a finalized one to put on the wall. And even at that point, there were elements that weren't finalized until they went on the wall. The main figure, for example, was one challenge. The artists that we'd referenced for this piece, they only used very, very abstract figures, being that they were native artists. So there were no obvious faces in their works. There were no very identifiable faces. Yet when we first submitted this design to the Gaffer District for approval, what we got back from them was, well, since the theme of this year is supposed to be female empowerment, we want an identifiable female figure. I'm a figurative artist. That is my strength. But that is something that this mural absolutely did not have based on what we were given to create it off of. So y'all might have seen in the video, there was a little bit of like a hidden face in the silver figure. That ended up last minute. Gigi created this really cool sort of abstract face that I wish I'd gotten a better close-up of, that went on, I believe it was the very last or second to last day. It was after the ribbon cutting that face made its way on. Another challenge that I certainly faced with this was we realized towards the end of the process that there were issues with the lift. One day it just stopped moving, and we had a technician finally come out to work on it, and they mentioned something about the hydraulic fluid. Now, I really am not familiar with mechanics or cars or anything like that, but I know how to steer something, and when I drove this lift, and when any of us drove this lift, I ended up being the only one who was not too terrified to move around this lift. You turn it soft right, it jerked to the left. You try to brake it, it'd go backwards. Walls were smashed into. I yet again feel the need to issue an apology to Carrie's Brew House for the state of their eaves after this, because they were thoroughly destroyed. There's a plant there. Those plants are there for a reason. But I digress. It was not my fault. It was the lift. And once it was fixed, it was like going from driving a semi, like a 5-year-old driving a semi, to just me driving my little Nissan around. It made the process quite smoother. So there were challenges. It was also the biggest wall that the Alley Art program had tackled so far. Not only did it turn a corner, but it was like twice the size of their biggest mural that they'd done. And being that it was COVID, we were working outdoors in the heat with our masks on. Rather than letting all of the students paint at once, we were only allowed to work in teams of 2 or 3. So it was a very, very slow-moving process, but it was also very rewarding. And I know I discussed working with the students before and how rewarding that was, but we worked with students who hadn't even worked in the design process, and it was the quietest kids who were the most concerned and the most scared to approach this wall that ended up impressing me the most sometimes. One of the young women who was interviewed in that video, she worked with me on a good chunk of the sky, and she just revealed to me just an incredible eye and talent, and I was absolutely blown away. And I am very glad that despite calls from the gaffer and from some others involved in the project to sort of tone down certain elements of the mural, that we'd stuck to it. We'd stuck to the rainbows. We'd stuck to all of these different textures and patterns, because it's what really allowed students to become expressive and show that when they were given a little bit of freedom, they could make some really amazing stuff. And it was just beyond rewarding. It was also my first, like I said, I've worked with CAE, but this was really my first professional gig. I was, hired through, Kelly Services. I went through the whole rigmarole. I worked with students. I very much had to fake it until I was no longer faking it. And I'm very, very lucky that something that I get to do this year is work with them again. So this takes us to basically what is next for me, what I'm doing this year, and what this has led to. Earlier this year, I made the decision, somewhat out of frustration, somewhat out of many, many months and years of contemplation, to quit my job. I had this realization that I would absolutely rather starve as an artist than survive off of scraps from a meal or a feast that I'd worked to put on somebody else's table. It wasn't for me, and I needed to commit fully to what I wanted to do and also to the risk of what I wanted to do if I was going to be successful. And I know for a lot of people that sounds like a privileged position, and it is to a certain degree. I don't have kids. I don't have people depending on me. I have myself and my plants for which I need to pay the bills. But I think also something that COVID taught us was that, what has seemed so dangerous about the art scene was the instability of it. Not knowing when your next paycheck is gonna come. Well, we all learned pretty quick, we don't know when our next paycheck is gonna come. Our jobs aren't for certain. We can lose them in an instant. And unemployment doesn't always come through. Sometimes you're stuck waiting 6 months with no money, just wondering what is going to happen to you. And I would rather do that on my own terms and absolutely seize that control, knowing that I am my own boss and master and my own demise, if so be it, than someone else. Very lucky, the Rockwell Museum has decided to hire me back again this year. I will not be the primary guest artist, but I will be working with an incredibly talented muralist based out of Philadelphia, Betsy Casaunas, and also some new students who I'm excited to get to know. Some other exciting things, I'm going to be painting a mini mural for the Ithaca Science Center. So I'm going to be working with a lot of other artists who will also be working on painting these murals. It's my first time actually venturing out of the Elmira Corning area, which is also exciting. And some other good news was I was accepted to my first juried show, which is the 2021 Southern Tier Biennial. I had applied to shows like this before. I'd applied to the biennial. I really didn't have much confidence that I would get in. I, again, thought my art was too weird for it, honestly, but I was very stoked to recently learn that they accepted one of my pieces, which I have right up there. And hopefully, I'm going to be working on some more murals. I'm working with Community Arts to line some up. I've been applying for gigs out of the area. I have been taking on commissions. It is slow moving. It is at times painful and stressful and sometimes less artwork than what to artists might feel like nonsense work. But I very much feel like it's slowly becoming worth it. So I wanted to end this with 2 things that artists hear a lot, and they are words that I absolutely believe that you should run from. It'll be great exposure, and you can add it to your portfolio. First of all, exposing my work to your cats in your living room is not good exposure. We need to stop accepting that as artists, and people need to stop saying that to artists and expecting us to, work for that sort of fragile promise in exchange for hours and hours of dedication and practice and money invested in supplies. And you can add it to your portfolio. Similarly, I have so many works in my portfolio right now, so many. I would rather it be a work that I wanted to create, that I felt invested in, than have the only payback or payoff for doing a portrait of someone's grandma just be that I could add it to my portfolio to show other people that I can do more portraits of grandmas or more portraits of your Aunt Phyllis. And if you enjoy doing that sort of work, I actually commend you. I think portrait work can really be touching for a lot of people. Seeing loved ones or your animals. I've sometimes done portraits like that, immortalized. It's really touching and it's beautiful, but it requires skill and work, and artists need to be compensated for that. So exposure in your portfolio aren't enough. Part of learning to value yourself and value your work is standing firm and making sure that clients and the public also value that, especially if they want it from you. If they want it from you, they need to pay for it. Or at least you need to feel confident that, giving it away or providing it as a gift is something that you really, really want to do and are doing for yourself and not just out of pressure. So what I want to end with is this. You are the only one who knows the value of your creative mind. No one else has your brain, and no one else can do what your brain does. Even if you think it's not good enough, even if you're constantly comparing yourself to others, even if you have never sold a piece or been in a show or gone to art school, you are the only one who can do what you do. And that is absolutely invaluable. That concludes my TED Talk. I want to thank everyone who came, everyone who watched, good luck to you. Hope you get out there and do some creating. Is this thing still going? Yeah. Oh. Oh, bless. Okay. I'm just in the room. Well, I didn't want to start saying random stuff to strangers over the internet, as opposed to you lovely folks. But yeah, I don't know if I saw hands. Yes.
You said you were disappointed when you came back to the States from Germany. Was there anything that you can talk about why that was, maybe?
Yeah, I had wanted to stay there permanently. I was on the path to citizenship. That was partially why I also wanted to get back within a certain time frame. I fully considered myself an expat at the time. I was, learning German, almost refusing to speak English to anyone out of just a desire to integrate. Also, living in the States is incredibly terrifying in comparison. There is very little stability here. If I fall off a scaffold and I break my arm, I can't work and I can't get money, and my life is kind of gonna be ruined for quite some time. But if that had happened to me over there, I would just have my arm patched up, I'd be sent home, and I would receive a check every month until I was well again and could work. So there was just a lot of security to living there. That's where all my friends were. I had at the time been, I hadn't lived in the States for 2 years. It wasn't home to me here anymore, and this wasn't where I wanted to pursue my career. So there was a lot of very personal reasons why I had to leave school, and it wasn't a choice. But that combined with the fact that I did not want to come back. I came back because I knew the longer I stayed there illegally, the less options I would have and the deeper hole I was digging myself. But yeah, thank you for asking.
Great job.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming again and hearing me.